And we have a quorum, 6 of 9. We're being videoed, I think. Right? Let's do a quick review of the agenda. Any public comment while we're on that piece of the agenda? Review. We'll look at, or we'll hear about plans for it. It's the B as in boy, ESE. I didn't correct all of them on there. As opposed to the, isn't there a DESE?
That's the Department of Elementary and Secondary.
As opposed to
Or DOE.
board. Right, okay. Which is May 24th. We'll hear about plans. I think Colin actually too was talking about a list of 8 items, and he was going to email them either to me or you at a time or to you, and but you may have them somewhere already.
Yeah,
We'll take a look, or we'll discuss the parent survey. Okay, the leadership job descriptions, but the legal documents won't be ready. We'll hear from Jennifer Feller, who'll be here. I think if you have not seen the email that went around later in the day, a couple of, Porter, did you see it?
I saw it.
Okay. Did you?
I have one, yeah.
Thanks. There's some requests around board membership that we'll review again. We can either review the role of the vice chair of the board, or I think that's in the hands of the governance committee. We won't be able to formally introduce the new head of school, but we'll hear an update on head of school and the same with the program coordinator, I hope. We can talk about chair succession, although we may postpone that again another week. We do need to hear a report from the finance committee. Its new chair being to my left. And we'll probably kick the last item out on the board chair vote. I think we're scheduled to meet again Wednesday. I think that's right. Which is probably a good idea because it'll be just before the 24th.
That's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
The 18th.
Wednesday the 18th.
Yeah. I think that was, I think that was a kind of a standard meeting time.
Okay.
We said it last week.
I probably have it on my calendar,
Yeah. Can you do that? Can you do the?
but I'll make sure I do it.
Great. Anything that I've missed on the agenda? I do have a possibility on the minutes, but I haven't confirmed it yet. I was hoping to do that by this evening. But if a couple of people could, Tony's going to be talking about the typing in a minute. It would be good to do that. I also will confess that the video from last time is instructive. It's actually worth watching because it will lay out some of the thinking behind some of the things that we're going to get to this meeting and probably next two. So the BESE. That's what Colin seemed to be.
Yeah,
We don't really have a technical
there's no
request or anything.
We don't have any requests. Last time I went online, the meeting, actually 4 or 5 days ago, the most to-date meeting they had was for the 17th, and then they added shortly, a couple of days later, that the 24th was there, but there was no agenda. And the last time I was on, there was still no agenda yet there. But my understanding is it's just the 8 concerns that came out of the meeting on December 21st, which we've provided an update to the department on, and believe that we're in very good shape on. So.
Do we know, it's probably worth, and that's why I asked Colin for, you know, an email from him on that. He was going to send it to both of us. There's whatever that list of concerns, and it's not the probation items, but it's a derivation of that.
Is it his responses to it, Joe?
No, it was the,
I don't.
I call them the concerns or something like that. Colin was saying there's a list of 8. And,
Yeah, they had a report following that meeting that listed the various concerns.
yeah, and the substantial one, there were 2. One was the director of education at the time, which
Right.
obviously is now converted to the head of school.
Yeah.
And the other one was the board member, adding a board member with public administration experience. And I think that's the person that Art had recommended that I met with, and I think maybe 1 or 2, or Tony better, Susan.
Miller.
Yeah, who,
I have a call into it. Right.
good, because Colin was, when I talked to him this morning, or yesterday, he said, you know, if you can get that done.
James and I were saying that one of us should surely go on top with her, and preferably both of us.
That would
And
be
James
great.
gave me his times, and I have my times.
Good. Well, and there's I think the other member of the governance committee is each of us, a few of us have had some conversations with Art about his concerns, and my sense is that especially at the end of this meeting and toward the next one, there'll be
While we're on that, there's another person who's surfaced, who has a lot of public experience, who I think would be terrific, but James and I need to. So,
be in touch with them.
yeah,
Right.
but there's 2 people who are really, moving on.
Yeah. I know that an earlier candidate was very excited about the possibility.
Yeah.
And I think, especially in anticipation of the meeting on the 24th.
Yeah, the public experience part would be, actually just would be too
Important for, yeah, that's right.
somebody with a lot of charter school experience.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing would be really helpful to us,
Definitely.
not just for the 24th meeting,
Right, not just for compliance
but
purposes.
like for some
Real
smart
purposes, right.
Smart.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree, that's good. I'm trying to remember what the other 8 were.
Well, the executive director had to complete the last of 4 IG trainings. Those have all been completed, and now 4 wonderful diplomas. Actually, could now apply to become a certified Massachusetts procurement officer. The compliance with the agreement with the IG's office with regard to open meeting law and training.
Was this the original ones for probation?
I actually have the list.
Or
Was the
second?
concerns
No,
raised?
let's
Okay.
revisit it.
Do you want to just walk through it?
Yeah, you was summary, Tony. Joey mentioned director of education position. I was the first for that. The new board member by April 1st. A financial plan, submission of a financial plan demonstrating viability by April 1st. We've certainly done that. Corrective action plan regarding special education. by February 1st, and then a follow-up visit, which has already happened. Communication with the charter school office regarding significant matters such as hiring and other issues like that. Providing reports and copies of all communications regarding any audits or investigations of anything of that sort. And reporting all changes in staff to the charter school office within 48 hours. That's it.
Good.
I was just going to suggest that we might want to discuss who's going to attend the meeting. And plans about how to participate in that.
I'm at the moment unable to be there for a business obligation, but I'm trying to change it. And I should know by early next week if I can do that.
Yeah.
I think it's the morning of the 24th.
They're usually in the morning. Yeah,
8:30
I
or
don't
something
know
like that.
this particular one.
I am mindful that matters to them.
I think it will matter a lot if we have a good presence there.
Sure.
I don't know, I imagine Colin will fill us in on what opportunities we might have to participate in that.
I don't think he knows yet.
Speaking or anything else. No, I mean, when he knows, he will let us know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea for everyone to be there.
Yeah, I will not be there for obvious reasons.
But you'll be in the building.
Actually, I'll be on the road that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 24th, which is a Tuesday today. Yeah, we do get an agenda at some point.
Can certainly check in next week.
Okay.
Yeah, my hope is that we'll have a significant turnout from the board and from, I know the parents will come, but to really have a very strong showing there. I don't know if you remember the October meeting, but I think it was there, it was you and me.
Just you two.
And so at the December meeting, they actually asked for an indication of which board members were there. It was quite important that we
Yeah.
had clear
Yeah,
numbers there.
no, that's very important.
May I just ask, what was the outcome of this meeting, the December 21st meeting was clearly, vote on probation. Tony, what is the motion of the outcome of this meeting?
Well, it's a good question because at the December meeting, the commissioner indicated on more than one occasion that it was, that this charter should not be treated any differently than any other charter, which has generally not been the case. But that all charters generally have 5 years to refine their program, to put all these structures in place. They're often started by very passionate people that may or may not have a background in education. And so we should, particularly given the performance on these concerns, we should simply go straight forward, unencumbered, I would hope, by any further sense that there is anything looming on the horizon, particularly given that we have enrollment in our pre-enrollment, even at its lowest figure, would be more than doubling the size of the school. We would be more than doubling the size of the faculty. That unlike many charters, we are now in an exceptional facility, not in the basement of a church or an old warehouse. I mean, if you really take a look at the performance on the concerns as well as the accomplishments of the year, where we've gone from a enrollment that was damaged just before opening, and we know why that occurred, but it meant that we plus students to 64 on opening day. Shortly after that, beginning to climb, and now back in the mid-80s. Under all of these questionable circumstances, the school has grown steadily, and that we have an incredible group of young people who 99.9% of the time are very happy to come to school every day. And that's an amazing accomplishment. So, I would expect the result to be that we will finally go forward without being encumbered any further. And that we will be treated like any other charter, which means that we should have the rest of the next 4 years before they come in for the self-study and accountability plan to take a look at where we're at. So we hope that will happen.
Questions for Tom?
It would be good if board members could check their calendars and schedules, and it would be good to get a nose count of who's going to be there. I'm crossing my fingers, Joe, about your arrangements.
Yeah, no, even then, I think, even if we all show up, we need to nail the head of school and the program coordinator, and on, and a few things that they'll, and Susan Hogue, and all those things I think have to be formally completed.
So, there were some things that.
We could all show up, and if those aren't done, it won't matter what.
I think there were some things, like, in terms of looking at this, like, almost like a progress report. There were some things when some of the updates were made that showed that it's like to have a few more trustees. They didn't really put a number on it, but it wasn't critical. It's critical, of course, to the vitality of the school, but it didn't stop everything dead in its tracks. They saw we're making progress, and I think along the same lines, there are some areas where I think we can still show that we're sustainable, that we're making progress, but other areas where we clearly have to have certain things in place. So.
Right, that's right.
That's sort of the proof of the pudding of what we do.
Yeah, and the conversation that Commissioner early March had to do with intention around complying with what we've been required to do. And even though we were late on a couple of things to explain what we were doing and how we were changing course on a couple of things and what that meant and why it was better, and then a shifting landscape, and suddenly we're not 80 students, we're conceivably 200, that kind of thing. That they understand that. Charter schools change rapidly. In this case, mostly for the better, so that's a good thing.
Does the charter school office make a presentation on that meeting from their visits and interviews they did with all of us?
I think they're part of it.
Okay.
Just like they have in the past, where someone will say, can you tell us about the visits and
Right.
Isn't that what they want?
I would assume, because they had Jeff Wilson speak at the last one, and I'm trying to think who else spoke, so I wouldn't be remotely surprised. Update on our special education back.
Because they did all those interviews.
Site
Visits and,
Yeah.
it's all around compliance, so those are zeros or ones. Whether they're doing it or not doing it.
I wish I could say I was going to be there, but my daughter's graduating from the medical school the night before, and we were working on moving and having lunch for her, and then had to come back. So if it's afternoon, I can do it. It's morning, I'm kind of committed. Hopefully they'll understand.
But I'm doing my best to move with what had been set a while ago, but this is good.
Jay, I take it you're thinking of having a board governance meeting in the next week, probably, to discuss your candidates.
To have people to propose for us to vote on the 18th.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
fine. James and I.
that's perfect. That'd be great. Good. Other questions for Tom? survey, there was a question about whether we could.
Yeah, I think that what I'd like to do is suggest that, let me show you what you're talking about. So
I was gonna get out of the way, right?
no, you're okay. I think you'll be okay. Your profile may become historic.
I don't know what you mean. What was that? Can I ask you a question about Jennifer before she gets in? Should I wait when we get, if we get to her item, it's easier, I can't.
Turn the lights on.
It's probably okay. Let me see how bright it gets once it's fully lit up.
Next year.
No, I haven't.
Tony's presentation.
So I'm not sure how well you can actually see. So this is a Survey Monkey based survey that was sent out to all the parents. And basically the format is that it makes statements about the academic program or about the critical parent-teacher, parent-school relationship. And you can go through it based on percentages. You can actually sort and select based on any criteria, so that there's a cover sheet that goes in front of this one, where you get into the actual survey, where parents indicate the grade that their student's in, the gender, the teacher, particularly in grade 6, 7, where they have different teachers for English, math, or history. They indicate which teacher it is, who their homeroom teacher is, and then if they're in grade 4 or 5, which of the 4 or 5 teachers is the one that their students in the class for. So as you go down the left column, in the overall broad review of percentages, here it says, for example, support is being readily available in English, and parents can indicate strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, no knowledge, and then it gives you a total response count in terms of the total number who of the total number who completed the survey, how many responded to that question. And so in this case, on that first one, you have 73% essentially who feel that they that extra support is being readily available in English. And so in the survey, it goes down through a number of different, and that's more about the sort of partnership and support, and then the academic questions, which are in a different part of the survey. So we can go into that. It does the same thing. So I feel my student's academic work is appropriately challenging. My student is engaged and excited about the work, appropriately varied. My student speaks positively about the
Wow, so
work.
86% agreed on that, or either agreed or strongly agreed with the.
Correct,
Student is
87%, but that's right. So going down through the whole list, my student's work is organized with multiple levels of work assignment, so we have been able to work with the teacher to find out the appropriate level of challenge for my student. My student his work is assigned with activities, discussions, projects, arts-based activities, so that my student has multiple ways to display his or her mastery. English assignments are differentiated, providing multiple levels of assignment, so my student is challenged appropriately. And if you go down through those, at least my suggestion is that the program committee should be, and it's actually on the agenda for the meeting on Thursday, should have time to really go down through all of this data and then discuss what it indicates in terms of feedback for the school, The intent is actually to do this even more regularly next year. We will do it again this year shortly in terms of sending it out, but collection of the data is really critical to have a sense of how the student and the parents are actually experiencing delivery of the educational program. But there were some striking things that came out of it in terms of the statement that I feel my students' academic work is appropriately varied and that my student speaks positively about the various projects. 90% of students, of parents indicated that they strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. And I think that's one of the reasons you see so many students happy about coming to school every day.
And both of those two top categories have 0% of no knowledge. And that's the only category, so the rest of it, that's the third biggest group. And here, that's 0 on both of those.
And interpreting data is always, interesting in terms of what does it really mean. So that later on, when we get into much more specific educational terms like differentiation of instruction, your total percentage of strongly agreed may be lower than 90%, but your those in the column for no knowledge goes way up. And so, that may be an indication that you're needing to provide more time to educate and work directly with parents who are critical partners in delivery of the education. So, are they really aware of what's going on in the classroom? Are they aware of the curriculum and how it's being implemented? Because if you see a high percent in the no knowledge, that could be that they have no knowledge because they're not hearing anything. It could be that they have no knowledge because they aren't sure what exactly you're measuring or trying to discuss.
Well, whose instrument is it?
This?
Yeah.
It's a compilation of different surveys.
Okay, so it's not one.
No.
Okay, because it'd be interesting to use one and go against the standardized results if someone's been using the same instrument over time.
You mean in terms of internally in the school or comparing it to other?
Both. So use one internally that you are then comparing against the standard.
That's great idea.
Number one. Number two, I do notice there's the response count is the total, were the same people dropping off the survey? Because it's a fairly high count that drops off. The count here is 30, but I think the total is 40.
This is administered through SurveyMonkey, correct?
Yeah.
So it's online? It's
online.
safe.
Meaning, well, if you look at the top, I don't know if it's on this page or
It's
not.
25, page 4.
Yeah, that's my point.
Okay, so
Well, there are also 25, but there are 25 respondents, but there were 35 who started the test.
Right, so you sort of qualify for which.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see who fell off and why.
Yeah, who started it
And why they dropped out after 5, you mean?
Right, and did they all drop out on different questions, or did they just drop out of the whole thing?
Right.
But then the other piece of this is, in an ordering that gives you 4 categories, agree and disagree becomes an important marking point. So the question would be, who's giving the school a C? Because the choices you have are A, B, D, and E. So it's either awesome or it's terrible, and then you have 2 others. It's either okay or not so okay. So a 5th column, and that's why I was asking about the instrument, because that way you could say, all right, so does everyone clump at them? Yeah, it's okay. Or does it really spread out? On the top question, which is an interesting one, it would be interesting to know of the types of students who are most excited. Who are they?
Right.
Just because that may tell you plenty about. Now I'm doing your business though.
You mean like 3rd graders versus, having 4th graders versus 5th to see?
Left-handed musicians versus, I don't know.
Well, you also have the long
maybe it's-
I could also comment on the teachers.
Sure.
Because if you find the 4th graders are all really excited.
Right, and that's why we don't want to get into this is exactly what I was hoping we'd do, just the aggregate of what this all is saying, or appears to be saying. It's great.
And as you say, it's standardized and it change over time. In year 2 and 3, you start looking at the responses, we have dropped our no knowledge category.
Then you get an answer to the question compared to what.
Mm-hmm.
So in a really well thought of school, what is, where would you want the numbers to spread on writing assignments that are intellectually challenging? Where is this may be awesome, but it may also be, well, no, actually, we want to see.
Usually we get
Well, I think
97,
for the teachers and the administration of the school, the aggregate is interesting in terms of pointing to areas you may want to delve into more deeply.
Right.
But where you get your greatest information is actually in the comment fields. And that's the part I can't actually show you because it gives specific feedback on specific teachers.
Right.
And sometimes identifies, depending on who the parent is who's filled in the survey, you can actually tell who the parent is if you're internal to the organization. But that's where you really get your deepest information, is because some people will actually write several paragraphs giving you very specific data.
Qualitative.
Tony,
Yes.
do you have a sense of the percentage of families that actually have access to online surveys like this?
Yeah, we have.
There's probably some who do not.
Based on email, that's the only thing I know on really, but in terms of email communication, we have 3 families that we know we have to do written paper communication with. So it's fairly high in terms
Do
of
they participate in this, do you know, or?
the 3 families.
Yeah, in some other.
It's actually a really good question that I did not look at, but it would be something that I could really check into because did they pick up the paper? We didn't have paper versions available of it,
Yeah.
and I don't know if they picked them up and filled them in or not because I just don't remember off the top of my
And
head.
parents heard about this through something that went home?
I send email links rather than.
Okay.
So I send
Yeah.
But the headline for your article is got to say, 87% excited about going to school.
What was the total possible respondent? How many people cared to?
I guess, I'd like to bump it, Joe. Okay, that's okay.
39.
39, but what was the potential universe?
Oh, when they filled it in?
No,
How could you send out
How
a
many
query?
people could have filled that out?
So 39.
Yeah, our enrollment at the time,
Okay,
which
so
would
it's
be somewhere
60,
around. When did we send this out?
So about 60?
November? Yeah, so it was probably around, at the time, it was around 67,
That's
68.
about 2/3.
Oh, is this from November?
Or November, December, early December, yeah.
Oh, now you have a standard to compare it
Oh,
by.
no, I'm interested in now.
In now?
Yeah, we haven't sent it out again, that's what I was
Yeah.
just saying, we're just about to send it out again.
Oh, I thought it was when we were talking about it. No,
Oh, that'll be fascinating,
So I
Joe.
love
Very
being
fascinating.
acting chair.
Well, that's what you meant by in terms of using the same one.
I thought this was from a couple of weeks ago.
No, this is great, because when we do it again, then you can really see how it moved.
Right.
Yeah.
Only 50% are excited.
Yeah, that was the 2 questions. One was how many people didn't do it? And
Joe, that's a number that should change and be significant after 6
I thought
months.
this was, well, that's why.
Because maybe we'll get higher participation.
Well, the question of compliance on surveys is really good. We've been doing them in CRs for 2 years, and we literally will do 2 or 3 events a week, and it's very high in the summer months and everything. And we started using SurveyMonkey because we thought, well, this is where it was at. What we realized was that, so many people are getting requests for surveys these days. And granted, how you feel about your school is obviously more important than how you feel about the Chamber Music Festival or the dramatic performance or whatever you saw. But it was it was very clear that very often just putting a piece of paper down or sending the kid or just having the time done was really a much higher yield on it. And I hate to sound like a Luddite, but here's a situation where the computer really doesn't, and the internet doesn't solve all your problems. And we're, to have a very, very vigorous effort for administration, education, and compliance of the survey can return some very, very good results. And I would think that, in respect to the fact that you have a data point in November, and now you possibly have another one towards the end of the year, maybe you want to do it again this way. The SurveyMonkey to have similar apples-to-apples comparison, but I would say that there is, if you want to get a higher compliance with your universal potential, respondents, you might just try giving the parents a survey when they come home, or when they pick up the kids or something, and say, "Could you please fill this out?"
Yeah, I think what you
Yeah,
lose,
that's bad.
I think what you lose there from, because I've done them in schools for quite a few years, and if your survey is primarily a tick form, you know, where you're filling in a box or circling a letter, then that's probably true, because you've got a sort of captive audience, and they fill it in. You can even do it around an event, and you hand them out and you collect them back. If you're looking for, because as I, going back again, where I find the most valuable information, whether it's in the evaluation of a staff member, in an assessment, or in this type of survey, is actually in the comments. And when people can take longer with it, and that may cause you to lose some people. Some people may only fill in the quick answers, and then they won't give you the comment. But if you try and sort of hand it out and collect it back at one event, you generally get one sentence, maybe two.
Okay, well, this would be like the intermission thing of the play. This would be like sending it home with the parent, or the kid,
Okay.
so the parent pulls it up. But it's a fun, I mean,
Also
again,
test both ways. So this is 6 months ago.
Well, it would be 6 months ago, because I'm talking about, well, I'm not sure if it was November, December, because it might be December.
are there plans for 1 year?
But 4 or 5.
Yeah, we should do
Coming
it
up on
soon.
6, yeah.
Yeah, I can check.
Yeah, because that was a while ago.
I think it's great that this is up and running. though.
Yeah, it's not-
Something that
exactly.
I would just point out that this kind of survey is important, not just for the purposes of planning for the whole school, but also in terms of compliance with Title I. If we go to apply to Title I next year, there are parental requirements around the parent program for Title I. And also, there's a couple of elements in the accountability plan that are based on parent surveys. So I would just
January
also,
12th is when we.
I would also recommend, Tony, that
I'm trying
I would just point out that I think it'd be good to include some questions that are drawn from the accountability plan, so that we're starting to
Yes,
ask parents
absolutely,
for
which we didn't
feedback
have.
on issues that
That's
we
a
want to
great
know
idea.
about for the accountability
It's a really
plan.
good idea.
But it came up last time. How come it came up?
Say again.
Why did we mention it? It
Because,
came up, and that's
the-
when I said, well, wait a second.
The board member who's not here requested it.
No.
I think that's why.
No, Tony was talking about it. It was part of the report
That's right.
on the beginning of the meeting.
Well, it was one of the goals that we established in terms of reviewing program quality.
Right,
Yeah, that's right. It was a
having
sub-goal,
parent survey.
program quality.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But that's why it's like, wow, we did a survey,
Yeah.
let's see it.
But I think having this up and running is a real achievement, and I think it'll continue to be really useful to the school.
Let's do it again.
Through the chair, can I just ask for clarification, go back, because I mistyped it in. The suggestion was to include questions directly out of both our accountability plan and out of the Title I.
Well, I don't think you want to get into the Title I piece right now because we're not involved in that, but I was just pointing out that to have this up and running and available will be useful in the future, probably next year. Yeah. So I think we targeted some particular kinds of questions we would ask parents for the accountability plan. I think
That's
make
correct.
sure that those are
All right, in here.
inserted.
Yeah.
Other questions for Tony? New leadership job descriptions. I think we sound like they're underway.
Yeah.
Well, we have one already. I know we have a head of school contract.
Did I hear you say that perhaps at the meeting on May 24th, she might attend? Or were you not saying that? That was just one of the issues.
Who?
The new head of school. Because that might make up for some of the board members Totally, that's what I thought you said, but it might also be an idea. You know, that they might be impressed with that.
Or here,
Yeah.
or here's fun, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Just
Yeah,
whatever.
I think it's important to have a couple of those.
Because they might say, well, you solved this problem and here she is, you know?
They probably want to talk to her. That would only help.
They're gonna go, board members, we're bored with them, let's see the head of school.
Well, the only issue is that if it's the person I'm thinking of, and I can't imagine it wouldn't be, then this person has a job already.
Oh, well.
But I think these are underway. You're going to talk to or communicate otherwise with Colin or somehow to.
Yes, yeah, he sent me an email today, he tried, I called him twice yesterday, and he couldn't get back, but he sent me a text this morning and said that he'll be free in the late afternoon, which I wasn't, but.
And it sounds, if I'm understanding correctly, that the only one that needs adjusting is your contract. Otherwise, we have a head of school contract, and the program coordinator contract would be an adaptation of
Yeah, absolutely.
anything else. So
Without doubt.
Okay.
And in fact, I mean, I don't want to segue there yet, but I did have a very good meeting with the head of school.
you know what?
And
Let's, why don't we wait on that, because we have a guest who's just arrived, and we're just arriving there on the agenda.
You're off. Timing is everything.
Jennifer, we rehearsed this a couple of times, right?
Waiting outside.
Has everyone seen the kind of later in the day?
I just read the letter.
Okay. Tony, did you see this?
I saw it, but I didn't read the last two paragraphs, so. And how computers are.
We are pleased to have Jennifer Bauer with us. Welcome to the Board of Trustees meeting for the Boston Community Arts Charter School. And we're just, I think a couple of us are just seeing the proposal.
Okay, well, I'll go with it.
Yeah, that's fine. However you want
Where would you like me to be?
to.
Would you like to join us at the table here?
Sure. That's pretty nice.
That would be nice.
Nice to meet you, Jennifer.
She's not aware of
You
this.
have
Awesome.
A quick background.
Joe, you can just point out that this is being filmed.
Oh, yeah, as you know, I think.
Are you me?
Are you telling us?
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, I thought we replaced you and your name.
Pardon me?
Someone
Oh, I am you.
filming us for their posting.
Oh.
School. Someone who's interested in our deliberations.
Okay.
Hello. All right, no, it's okay.
Welcome.
Jennifer and I met a few weeks ago through someone that we had all worked with before named Leslie Pelton, who ran a day-long planning session for us. And when we were first talking, it was on the issue of reviews and things like that, and just kind of Leslie saying, this is someone, to me, this is someone that we should meet and talk to. And as you and I talked a little bit over the last few weeks, the review idea became something I thought a little more interesting. And I mentioned it to a couple of people, and then thought, let's just see where this may go. So thank you for being here.
Of course, pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Hello, are these parents? Are you guys parents? Terrific. Great. So I'm Jennifer Feller, and as Joe said, he and I talked, I don't know, 2 weeks ago maybe, at Leslie's suggestion, and he asked that I put this proposal together, so you have that proposal, and I'll answer any questions about that you like. But I thought it might be helpful for me to come and tell you a little bit about my background, what I do, what I've done with charter schools, and what a charter school review entails. So I will do that. Before I start, I wondered if, I see your names, but I wondered if you could just tell me, has anyone here been through a school review before, so I can know where I'm starting? Was that ASME review, a Massachusetts charter renewal review,
It was a private school review.
yes, okay. And Joe, you've been through like with the Uplands Corner,
Upham's Corner and Nativity Prep.
so also an independent school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same, yeah,
Accreditation, regular accreditation.
with the K-12,
Yeah, K-12. Some years ago.
or a public, okay.
I'd say, Brett, I didn't know if it says near, generally NESAC, New Association of Schools and Colleges.
Same, private school.
Private schools, okay.
And I'm a virgin when it comes to
No
being
one's been
examined, I'm
through it,
sorry.
okay. So all right, well then we'll start fresh then with the charter school review. First, a little bit about me. I am a former math and science middle school teacher. I started teaching in independent school, and then after I got before I got my master's, I guess I went to a school called Shackleton School. I helped to start a school called Shackleton School. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but that was in Massachusetts, an independent school. And it's an expedition school. You know it?
Sure.
Yeah. So that was a high school, and was a founding administrator there, so went through that whole startup process, which was pretty crazy. And then got my master's and went to help to found the middle school at the Neighborhood House Charter School in Dorchester. So back into public education that way. And that program, as you probably know, has thrived. It's been a big success, I think. And we learned a lot through that process as well. Then I went out to California and I worked for the Charter Schools Development Center, which is a statewide technical advisory group essentially, and policy advice as well, group out there. And I ran their charter school incubator. So I worked with charter school teams from the design phase all the way through their startup year. It was a two-year program, incubator program. Then we also coached teams beyond that and ran workshops and boot camps and so forth for charter schools that were both starting and already into their, at that point, probably fifth year. It wasn't that old at that point. So we did that for a while and then moved into accountability out in California. And accountability out in California is a little bit different than here because in California, well here there's one charter school authorizer, the state. California, there are about 900 because every district can charter a school. It's complete chaos. And there were districts who didn't even know they had charter schools. It was kind of crazy. So we did all sorts of accountability work there. And then came back here and have been doing accountability work in Massachusetts and then also around the country with a group called Schoolworks. I don't know, you may or may not have heard of them. They do school reviews as well, and I work with them as well. So with them, I work with national networks, like the KIP network is one I've been working with lately, and then I also work as an independent consultant doing reviews and also coaching schools. So that's a little bit about me. The school review process. The idea of a school review is really to give the school itself, I mean, it can be done from a number of different perspectives. Sometimes, a state review comes in, that's one thing. But this idea is to give the school itself a snapshot, an outside perspective snapshot of where they are in time. And we do that across a number of domains or areas of inquiry. So the idea is to balance breadth with depth, just like a curriculum. And you have some areas of inquiry here, but the areas of inquiry are things like leadership, administration, governance, teaching and learning, culture and climate, community, parents and community, the basic areas that you would need to address as a school, and that I'm sure you all talk about all the time as the board. What we do is we start with these areas of inquiry, and ideally we focus them a bit. So for each school, we say, all right, within teaching and learning, for example, we know we've got curriculum dialed, so don't spend a lot of time there, but I really want to know what's going on with assessment, or whatever, wherever the case is for your school. So we try to touch on everything, but with some focus. So there's a beginning process where I talk with the executive director or the head of school, whoever's the leadership team, and we start to narrow down where are the real areas of focus for this school within the areas of inquiry. With those in hand, we develop indicators. And this is a very powerful process. So we go through and we say, what are we looking for in this school in particular? You know, we take best practices basically, and we say, in this school, what are the indicators of quality? How will we know if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing? And within each area of inquiry, we develop these indicators. With those in hand, and that process takes usually a week or two, depending on how fast we move, but it usually takes 2 weeks. With those in hand, then we come to the school. The team comes to the school, and we sit in classrooms, we interview focus groups, we do one-on-ones, we get as much information as we can, both through observation and talking conversations. I skipped something. Initially, we do a document review as well. So, of course, before you come to the school, we'll get as familiar as we can. In any case, once we're on site, we do a lot of evidence collection. We then take those and try to make sense of them. We come to develop findings, and perhaps the most useful part of the whole process, we then sit with you, or I should say sit with the leadership team, and that will depend from school to school who that is, and try to have a conversation about where the strengths of the school are, what are the areas of challenge, and where are your priorities. And out of that process comes an action plan. This is a little bit different than a school review that you might go through with the state, because that kind of ends with the report. The report is really a formality that comes at the end, and the meat of it is this conversation about where you are, what's important, what rises, and what needs to be addressed. And at that point, we do some follow-up, and then the school is primed for, if you want to keep working, at that point you've done an enormous bulk of work, and there's room for a follow-up if you want or not. That would be determined later. But there's some follow-up included already in a basic review. So that's where your review is. Probably a lot of questions.
Jennifer, do you generally do reviews of schools that are very young, such as this, or are you looking, do you generally focus on schools that have been underway for a while?
It ranges. I have done many of first-year reviews. Second-year reviews are very common. I pretty much every single year up to about 10, 12, I think 12 is the oldest school I've reviewed. There aren't that many old charter schools. There are a lot of young charter schools. So yeah, first-year review I have done before.
Is the first year review as common as the second year review, or which happens more?
In my experience, probably a second and third year review. We may do more of those, but I mean those may be more common. But first year reviews, usually there's some review at the end of first year.
Sure.
Because it's very hard to sort out forest from trees at the end of the first year, usually. And people are pretty, it's helpful to have an outside perspective sometimes.
Jennifer, in your experience with the incubation work you've done and this current work you're doing in school reviews, you listed 4 or 5 areas where you tend to focus. Leadership, administration is one, learning and teaching is another, culture and climate, and parent communication, outreach. What do you feel is the most critical one in school success?
Well, I believe that every time you come into a school, you have to go right back to the student experience. So what is the student, when they come into the school, what do they experience? Sometimes school review tends to think so big, you forget that really what matters is what happens when a student walks into the classroom. So I think teaching and learning is really at the heart of what the school does. That is that's the pulse point. So that really lets you know what's actually happening in the school. Now, in order to change that and improve that, leadership is where you have to look. Okay, so then the school's principal is really whatever the structure in this particular school would be, I would say is the key lever. but somebody can wow you with leadership, and then you go into the classroom and you find out, really not very strong. So, or, it's not usually the reverse. Usually if things are really strong in the classroom, you've got wonderful leadership. But, that's what I would say. And I also have, if you want to see it, they're pretty basic, but I did bring the areas of inquiry and some sample indicators and findings, if you'd like to look at them. And I can pass this around. I think there's enough for, there's enough for almost everyone. And I wanted to also bring, I have here a sample of a finding, so that you know what kind of thing, what I mean by an evidence-based finding. These are evidence-based. Oh, okay, great. Which one?
That one?
Another sample finding.
So is defining the so-called report, or is this the action plan?
This is the report.
The report, okay.
So, yeah.
Can I ask you something about very simply? Wondering about teacher collaboration. I don't see that here. Is that
Whether I've worked in that?
No, whether that's an area of inquiry. Is that something you look at? Or whether there's collaboration
Under teaching and learning, teacher collaboration in some schools is highly valued. In most schools at this point, it is highly valued, not in every school. So it would be an indicator we would look for. Do teachers have time to collaborate? How do they do it? How meaningful is it? What happens during that time? How is it used? How does it impact their practice? Is that the kind of thing?
I guess I just, so it's under instruction or whatever.
To be under teaching and instruction.
Right, but for, it sounds like for an indicator like that, depending on what you discover is the interest and what we want to work on or look at or focus on as an area of inquiry, that becomes a part of it.
Exactly, if that
Right,
arises
I mean-
in this school.
In other words, it's not limited to these.
Yeah.
Oh, no, this
Right,
is just
this
a
is-
very broad, the type of things that are under each area of inquiry.
And you said actually we would help create the indicators.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Right, so what's important, you know,
I got it.
for this school, yeah.
Yeah.
And it really looks different for a place like a KIPP school than for a place that I assume that's a community arts,
Right.
you know, school. So I hope
You would
that I would see more. I would hope. And I told Joe too that part of why I'm interested in this work is that I'm, as I'm sure you know, the proliferation of schools right now in Massachusetts are more along the model of the no excuses, high accountability, I don't know what they call it, testing
Right.
schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, which is fine for what it is. I'm very interested in also nurturing
Mhm.
a movement of schools that are a little more holistically focused.
It's
That's
true.
my background as
Yeah,
well.
that came up early. That's
Yeah.
when we were talking. It's like, okay, so this is different. Which I think, I mean, at least for me, and I'll begin to weigh in a little bit on why I think this is critical, is because given what we're trying to do, it will not be easy to measure this in ways that are traditional measurement systems. I'll just go out on a limb as a non-educator, as someone who knows a little bit about measurement and evaluation, but certainly not about a charter school, generally or not an arts-based, arts integrated school. So I also think that as a prospective board chair, the notion of constant improvement is critical. I happened to see Steve for Tony Wagner the other night. I don't know
Oh,
if
sure.
Really?
It's really.
He's my student.
Well, his wife, I actually tried to hire her at Hopkins Corner Charter School, PJ Blankenhorn. So we've kept in touch, and he invited me to I'm digressing a little bit, but it has a point, which is something called the Finland phenomenon.
Yeah.
Really interesting film about certain things that seem to work. One of which is evaluation all the time. master's teachers sitting in classrooms.
But not standardized tests.
Not at all.
At all.
Not at all.
At all.
But this notion of constant evaluation and assessment and in total transparency, I mean, the idea of let's get a B, and then let's see that we've got a B, and then let's improve it from there, and then keep improving it. And let's take a look at ourselves, warts and all the time. That's critical, and to have that done by a third party. And by, I might add, to be able to say, again, as the prospective board chair, on May 24th at the BESE, this is what we're doing. That has a little power to it. How am I doing so far?
I say, I mean, I want to thank you.
Not quite done yet, because we have a head
Took
of
a breath.
school. We have a head of school. I know I could go on about this because I think it's that important, especially for a one-year-old target school. This is absolutely critical. I'm willing to bet that we're not doing so well. If I felt we were doing well, I wouldn't bother being the co-chair. I'd rather be part of an organization that seeks to improve all the time. And you want to look at itself, stare itself in the face. We also have a new head coming in. I'll wager that she'll be comforted by the idea that a third party knows what she's doing, and I'd say that even if you weren't sitting 8 feet from me, is going to come in and actually do a whole school review with a finished document at the end that says, here you go, call me. Let's talk again. So I'm sure there are reasons we shouldn't do this, and I'm wide open to listen to them.
I'll be devil's advocate, first advocate. We know we're small. We know we're imperfectly staffed. We know we're an odd-shaped entity. Next year, we've already got this other plan that's about to roll out, including this other person that thinks they know what they want to do as head of school. And we're not measuring that at all. In a perfect world where it's paid for by some third party that I don't know about, I say, yeah, how can it hurt?
That's what we're
Okay,
doing.
because then you'll say, well, there's fire over there, might be coming, and here it's just smoke. So, good point.
I jumped ahead and thought, you know what, I bet the board will go for this. Especially if I could find a third-party funder for it, who's willing to consider a grant application and give you an answer next week if we vote to approve this tonight.
But if they said, but don't come back to me
Did you hear
next.
the last part? If we vote to approve this tonight.
If we, oh, fine, okay. But let me ask this, if they or others say, well, don't come back next year.
Then let's do it again next year.
No, but I'm saying, if we can't afford it in year 2, then I wouldn't think it would be as valuable in year 1, which matches the question you asked. But if we can afford both of them, or get another freebie, sure.
No, I'd do it now.
Yeah,
I'd do it now, and given the numbers we just looked at, if we can't afford this at the end of next year, we have much bigger
Okay.
problems than even
All right.
Jennifer could solve.
So you're,
Number silver, let me just.
Jennifer could help us identify.
There we go.
so the key sentence there, I know you were laughing, but the key sentence was, if we approve it tonight, we could get this as a freebie, or possibly.
Yes, I'll know next week. I'll know within a week whether or not we get it. I'll be able to report on it on that Wednesday.
When did we ever turn down a free survey?
Well, through the chair, I mean, I actually think there are a bunch of benefits that we're not talking about. That, you know, the transition from the dream and founding members of the board, people who put the charter together, to it actually being implemented in fact, you hope,
Operating.
and operating,
Right.
that's a huge and difficult transition. And at this point, the benefit of engaging a process which gets feedback from all constituencies, all stakeholders. And through that process, everyone knows they're being heard. They know that their input is valued, because we've got parents who have very individual kids, and we're going to try and seek to educate every one of them. It's a huge undertaking, and through a process like this, you would come out with, I would hope, probably a shared language about the way forward and what you're about.
Yeah.
A really good sense of priorities in terms of how you're going to go about it, where you're putting your time, and how you need to support your leadership team, which we were hearing just a moment ago is critical to success. So that head of school to actually come into a process where they get to listen, participate, learn themselves in a risk-free environment. They're engaged right away in hearing from and working with everybody. So it models the collaboration that would be at the heart of doing well. And at the end of it, you come out with this thing that I would find it almost impossible to believe. It's possible, but I find almost impossible to believe that you want to come out of it with almost the vast majority feeling really excited, really on board, great clarity of purpose.
Clarity, that's right.
I mean, it's hard to.
It's actually, you know what? Here. Well said. That's it. That's the whole thing.
That's because she said there.
We never talked about that. In fact,
We really didn't.
We didn't.
That's because he says we're not going to identify your weaknesses, your challenges.
But I also think,
That's why you're
I
not
really
right.
do think there's a certain innate confidence in ourselves when we're willing to say, take a look, warts and all, and now we'll do something about it. That's the way to be. It's absolutely the way to be. I'd like to think that maybe we're modeling it for maybe other schools. And it's not a bad thing at all.
Well, certainly as a charter school, that's one of our commitments is to exactly do that. That's what we do it.
I just,
And the idea of, this idea of constant
Improvement.
constant re-examination of what you're doing is a really healthy way to go.
Like the Finland
And
thing,
if
so to
we
speak.
could get off on the track of, at the end of our first year, a challenging first year, and start that practice, I think that's a good precedent
Yeah.
to set.
so,
Today, you were going to say.
Yeah, I was, Jennifer, I was wondering if you could give us the names of some of the schools that you've recently done, so that we could talk to them?
But I need to probably check to make sure with those principals that it's fine.
Of course.
But I'm happy to send you
Of
references, of
course.
course.
But that would be very helpful.
Certainly. In addition, I was thinking that you talked a little bit about, Tony, about shared language. I think also in a process of evaluation, what can be self-evaluation, constant evaluation. Sometimes it's hard to know what you're looking for. How do we know that we are successful? How do we know what success looks like in this school? And to put language around that, to put concrete and descriptive language around that, I think can be a helpful process. Once you have those indicators in place, you can then use them to reflect in various domains throughout the year and then each year.
You know, Jennifer, we've drafted an accountability plan, as we're required to do, which will be the measure by which we're either renewed or not in 5 years, as you know. And I think it might be a useful additional benefit from this if we were to come out of it with a better sense of what our accountability plan's strengths are, and perhaps some areas that we need some coaching about how to adjust that. Because I don't see that as a final document. I don't think we're going to bed as right now either.
Okay,
So
well,
if we could
that's
re-examine that as part of this process, I think that might be very helpful for us.
very wise. I can't tell you, I've been on renewal visits, plenty of them, where the school's actually getting fine at the end of the 5th year. But then we have this accountability document, which has these bizarre, kind of highly specific measures that were relevant 4 years ago, but aren't relevant in the 5th year, and hamstring the school. I mean, it's a disaster. And I will say, to its credit, Charter School Office tends to finesse it if possible, but it's a mess. It's really problematic. So to take a look, it's very wise to take a look at your accountability plan now and make sure that it aligns with your actual school goals. You know, and that it doesn't it's also a different document. So here's our vision of excellence. And our accountability plan is the legal document by which we will be judged. So the accountability plan, you go like this, and your vision, you go like this, and then the actual school is something in between. You know, but your accountability plan, you don't want to reach. Just a word for words there.
Can you give us an idea? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, please.
After you.
If we start dancing together on this, I think one of the things that would be very helpful is your experience with startups and your experience with new schools, because we have sometimes talk, in terms of our goals and stuff, we sometimes talk about, what the school might look like some time from now, or what, for instance, arts integration is a very nascent thing in this school here. I mean, it's really, really, early. So very early things have been started, little roots and shoots kind of, but it would be, absurd to say that we've gone, full tilt into it, or that we're really, that our practice is kind of rich in that area. So I guess what I'm saying is that one of the things that you could be very helpful to us about would be, what are the suitable goals for roots and shoots in the first year? I mean, what are the sort of, what is the groundwork that we're laying that will stand us in good stead, and what are the habits and practices of a new school that we should break soon if we want to, get smarter and better? I mean, do you know what I'm saying? That the moment Gordy's hesitation about whether this is the right time to do this, I share it a little bit, but it would make a difference to me if you could help us think about what's appropriate to look at because we're a first year.
Yeah, I just second that, because I think, like I've said to several people over the last couple of weeks particularly, this year's been about survival. And there are assumptions that things that have happened due to a vacuum in either staffing or time, or that they actually indicate some intentful model. And that's actually far from the truth. And I think to create a safe environment for all stakeholders, including teachers, to really be able to talk about what's worked and a slew of things that really happened, and then get on board together with where you're wanting to go. I think it would be just amazingly beneficial.
And that's where, to your point, Jay, and yours, that was the appeal, was we're not talking about a review of a 40-year-old school or a 140-year-old school. It's typically schools that are, charters aren't old. There aren't that many that are older than 12, 14, 15 years.
Oh, right.
So the reviews that get done are first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And it's when it's when stuff's happening. And if it's not by plan, it's reacting constantly. It's almost like this is a more multi-dimensional approach than just a day one planning session, which also afforded us a chance to step back for a day and say, all right, so wait a second. What are we can't do all of this. What are we going to focus on? What are we going to actually plan to do when we're not reacting to all the things that are happening? And it's a wonderful, it's perfect timing, I think, to do this.
Well, yeah, it means you're going to end up with a culture where, you do this now, at this sort of critical transition moment, but we're really, we're actually just becoming something.
That's right.
And 3 years from now, or 4 years from now, where you have sort of veteran faculty to the school that have been here a while, veteran parents, all the stakeholders have been through this, and it's been part of what we do. It's like,
that's right.
We do this.
And you can
we're not part of
right.
it.
So going out together or something? You can imagine back 7 or 8 years from now and reading these things. It'd be interesting.
So, Joe, I just wanted to thank you for bringing Jennifer here. I think it's key to where we're at now. I hope it presents a model of what the school does. I always say what happens at every level is very important. And so at this level, when we're evaluating, teachers need to be evaluating all the time. And I think that process of constant feedback is really, really important. So I just want to thank you. because
And thank you for getting the money. If you get the funding, that's,
I haven't done that yet,
Yeah.
but it looks pretty good. But I would say that, the lesson of the last few weeks is there's a lot of passion around the school. As we said in a couple of smaller meetings, it means something. So it's not, you're welcome, but it's really the idea of the school that was ultimately appealing to.
well, even the stormy ones are demonstrate the passion. Right?
You learn something every time.
Jennifer, could you give us an idea of the time commitment that's involved in the interviews and some of the preparation that's necessary for this?
Well, I try to be very respectful of the fact that the work you're doing day to day is by far the most important work, the work the school is doing. So I try to be less burdensome, or as least burdensome as possible. That said, there is some document, for the document review, we try to only ask that you send what's available. So there's no, it's not like a private school review that people are often, if you've mostly been through those, they are much more burdensome, they are much longer. They are a deep self-reflective, everybody talk forever review, and it's not this. We only ask that you send what's already been put together as documents. So that's easy, or should be fairly straightforward. The on-site days are intense, so it's a scheduling hassle most of all, to just find time when teachers are able to talk. We stay late so that teachers can talk after school. We don't expect that people would miss classes for this. So that can be some scheduling headaches, but hopefully isn't too burdensome. We do ask that people stay, whoever you want us to interview as well. We ask parents to come, so sometimes it can be hard to bring parents together, but hopefully there are parents who are able, for example, we can schedule that around pickup time for a parent focus group. We do ask the board to come, so we'll do a board focus group, talk with the board. The biggest burden is probably on whoever the liaison is, and that will probably be you. So that would be just time. That's just time. It's a matter of during those 2 days, probably 4 hours, something like that. So an hour in the beginning of the first day and the end, an hour in the beginning of the second day and the end. And then there's a half day where we come together and make sense of all this, and that's with the leadership team. So that would be, you all would determine who you want to be on that meeting. And at that, so that's about it. That's about the burden on you guys, I'd say.
What about setting up areas of inquiry and stuff like that?
So ahead of time, normally that's with whoever the liaison is, and usually the liaison is principal. So where there's a lot of back and forthing, and that is a lot of communication. It's not, I can usually come in for 1 to 2 on-site conversations there. So we come in and just sit down and talk about where do you want to focus? Where do you see us looking deeply and less deeply?
Because I would like the board to have some input with that, if that is okay.
Yeah, we
Ask for
can
that,
structure
but I
that.
would like to have the board have some, because Tony's one person,
Right.
That's the leadership team is one person. I think it's important to have a variety of perspectives.
Well, what I might suggest there is, it's just off the top of my head, we could do it as a whole group. You also could appoint 1 or 2 people
We
from
have a
your board.
program committee, that might be the way.
Something like that. You might have 1 or 2 people from the board. It can be a little more productive than trying to have a large conversation about each point, because it's a show. And again, that's not a long conversation in itself. I will take them back, look at the Massachusetts areas of evaluation, which are pretty straightforward, mission, academic, organizational, and then best practices that we take generally, and then your areas of focus, and try to narrow them down and present a document to you. You'll say, maybe not this, how about this, do some tweaking, back and forth. That's how that goes. So that's some online stuff, some time there.
Shannon, just a quick question on the action plan and follow-up part,
Yes.
because obviously the results are really what matters. How do you get compliance with the follow-up? And if there's really a lot of work to do, is this are we left with the tools to do self-evaluation going forward, or is there a recommendation you would make to the board? I mean, how does that work, and can you just sort of ballpark what the percentage of clients that you have right now that have successfully complied with that action plan is?
No. I don't think I can, because my job is not compliance.
Okay.
So that's the charter school office's, job.
No,
I
meaning
mean, small C compliance.
Right, I
Small C
understand
compliance.
what we decide.
Right.
Even still, I'm going to come back and say, look, I'm going to come back and say, here's what I found. Here's what we found, okay? Based on the evidence, this is what we found. My job is then to step back and facilitate a conversation with the leadership team around what do you want to do with this information? Where do you think you need to go with this? What do you think is doable and practical? And then you decide where to go with it. Now, I do like to follow up. I can't stand just leaving and finding out what happened. So I do come back for a follow-up visit, but that's very brief, and that's usually a one-on-one conversation. How you doing? Where's, maybe some thoughts about, well, have you tried this or this? That's more of a coaching visit, but it's very brief. So what you're left with then is the action plan and then a set of indicators, which you can decide to use or not use. And hopefully, as you say, a self-evaluation and reflection process that will lead you, to say, how are we doing when this is the board's job? How are we doing? Here's what we said we do. It's on paper. How have we done? You kind of have a checklist. But it's not my job to come.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm more interested in
That's
what tools are we left with to do those, and you said you have the indicators, you have your responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility as a board to make sure you always have it on the right track. So it's really up to us to take the information that you provide and work this through as a regular exercise in managing and directing the school.
That's right.
So-
And of course, I can do coaching as well, ongoing coaching with the school, so we talk, and then we can take that and work with it, but that would be, a separate process.
There's also, it may be that we can even reorganize if we need to on the board level to track certain things, depending on what comes back. Program committee may end up being 3 different subcommittees, who knows? But there's got to be a way for us to actually do what is going on.
Well, it would be a waste, I would think, to,
No, I
right,
agree.
we get this
No,
great
no,
thing, and then we don't implement it, I'm sure it happens
That's
all the
right.
time.
Well, plus
Hopefully
we've got
we
it,
don't.
but this is all on the ascension too. I mean, there's a head of school coming in, the program
I
coordinator.
think that's a key part right there, so there's a head of school coming in.
Right.
And I just did a review actually in Boston with a school that had a head of school coming in. And one of the pieces of feedback we got was that she said, I can't believe it, just handed me on a plate. Thank you.
I don't have to go find these things.
Yeah, you just did the first months of my job. Yeah, so that was, at least for that school, was positive.
Yeah.
I will also say that while the results, and the sort of action plan that you're left with and so forth, I hope is very helpful. As you all pointed out, the process itself can be helpful. So the process itself of feeling that you can give feedback in a safe place, of coming up with what is it that we believe is excellence will look like in this school, all those parts are valuable unto themselves, I hope.
Yeah, and it's just, I want to touch on that just for a minute, because to me it's always interesting to watch how different constituents within a meeting like this, what they come up with, what words they use to express it. And not too surprisingly, board members went immediately to, well, it's going to be our job to implement this and to make sure it happens. And in fact, I would hope that the process described is actually one of collaboration, and its greatest value is the engagement of all stakeholders in the process of defining, refining, and ultimately implementing what comes out of it. The minute you get into, I think, a paradigm that defines a separation of, you're actually pulling apart what you're actually creating in culture. And so, I would hope that it wouldn't be just a document that would lead to, well, here's your marching orders to your incoming head of school, or that we would actually not engage them in the process because they actually, if everything goes well, so I hope it will, they complete their current assignment in the very beginning of June, and would absolutely be available to participate and be engaged in
Well, I think it's.
thinking, hearing, listening.
And the program coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Likely starting at
Absolutely.
Monday. But, so you're already starting your work, you just didn't know it.
And if the target timeline we have here, if we were to engage these services, would be starting sometime the week of May 16th to the 20th, and we're almost there. I assume you never want to have the head of school, we want to have that ready to go, and then the finish up would be sometime on the 16th of June. Is
The
that-
finish
is that-
up can be, that's what I wrote down.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
pretty flexible. I think that the key,
About a month.
date-wise, dates that I need to make you aware of, the last week of May is out for me. So,
Once we have development, customized indicators and classroom observation.
no, that's the first, sorry, the week before that.
Okay,
If
sorry.
you'll notice, there's sort of a break.
I see, yeah, okay.
And that's why,
Memorial Day.
yeah. And it's Memorial, yeah, and it's the week leading up to Memorial Day.
Gotcha.
That's out, but otherwise, I think we're fairly open, and I thought that the week of June 6th through 10 would be good for a visit, in part because, I put together a team for these visits, and in this case, it's a small school, would be a small team, it'd probably be 2 people. But I have someone in mind who I think would be a good fit, who's been through, as a principal, some startup chaos and, the process locally, and could be a really good fit and has a lot of insight to offer. So that he is available there. So that would be a good person too. But there's others if that doesn't work. And then, the rest of it's fairly flexible. So, for example, we could work around your new head of school's schedule for when we sit down and have that conversation and talk about how to move forward.
But the point is, this could happen on a pretty brisk timeframe,
Which is great.
which is great, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think there's some pressure to get it obviously done during school.
Exactly.
When is your last day of school?
Oh,
Is it
middle of
August?
July.
June 28th.
You have a lot of holidays.
So to that end, unless there are other questions for Jennifer, I, the chair, would accept a motion to authorize the acting chair to sign whatever contract there is that's relevant, or however.
Or I can make up a contract, I didn't expect it.
No, that's okay, well, I don't need to do it, I couldn't do it now anyway, because I'm gonna make that.
I would make such a motion with the
Contingent on 2 things.
contingent for sure on funding, because we got this.
Yeah, no, it's outside.
And what was your second thing?
Was listening to you, Jay, was and satisfactory completion of reference checks.
Good.
Sure, yeah.
Is that the official motion?
That would be my motion.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
What was that?
Discussion.
That's contingent on funding as far as that?
Yes,
Okay, good.
definitely.
Okay. Who seconded? Some discussion?
All those in favor? Thank you all. Now I have a favor to ask. And it's through the executive director. It may be useful, if there's a way for you to do it, to visit with faculty, to be here for a little bit, if you can, and if it makes sense, sometime.
As part of the
No,
development of
just
the...
it may be important for them to know that this is underway, and
This is
you want to convey it a different way.
No, I think it'd be brilliant if it's possible to set up time for you to come and
I
talk
think that
about
would
the
be-
process and its value.
And you can come back with a contract, Jennifer.
All right, well, why don't,
Incentives.
why don't I, usually the first step, and I'll send you a contract, we'll do that, and then I'm assuming, Tony, that you would be my primary liaison here, so we would sort of schedule going forward. And then we can talk about a time when I can come and talk to that.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Hurrah.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Chair, could I check the motion? Just,
Yeah, please.
the motion to approve the acting chair to hire Ms. Feller with the proviso that the necessary funding and references are in place.
Yeah, I think it's authorized the acting chair to sign the appropriate.
So we were the easiest sale this month, right? We just talked ourselves right into it. She had to hold the bag.
Jennifer, thanks.
It's been my pleasure. I really look forward to working with you. As I say, I'm very excited about the work you're doing here, and I can't wait to see the school itself.
So is it, do you want to send, you
I'll
actually,
send you the contract.
yeah, and the
Well,
the references to, and then what I can
To you.
do is connect you to Tony and you to Jay. And if someone else can share the burden depending on the references, is there a volunteer? So that you're, I'm not looking at you, Dave.
I volunteer chemistry.
I need that as well.
Is that okay? Yeah. Why don't I do that?
Right, I'll send, but I send them to you, is that right?
Yeah, send them to me, and I'll connect you to the, I'll send you the emails for
Okay.
everyone.
Get one of those a year each.
Good. Nice to meet
Very
you.
exciting.
Good.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. Bye. Bye.
Board membership, I'm going to skip over because Amy and I haven't finished talking, and it sounds like we have a meeting next week. In fact, I'm going to skip over a couple of these and postpone them to next week. The vice chair, I think, is in the capable back of the governance committee, if I remember right. But we can bring that up whenever it's appropriate.
Sure.
I think that you're waiting for.
Do that in governance.
You're waiting for nominees.
Yes, we are.
Head of school announcement and program coordinator announcement will wait until next time. I think both of those are underway.
Miraculous disappearing agenda.
And, well, just,
It's the last month.
we didn't talk to Roberto, I have a close style, so.
I like this.
Just a note on the program director business. I think Dave has mentioned this before, but there too, we need to, as a board, we need to be mindful of whether what we're planning and what we're hoping to have can be funded.
Well, I think the conversations I understand that have happened with this particular program coordinator, who's been talking to Jody Ziegler for the better part of 2 months, would have a consulting arrangement.
Till the end of this school year.
Well, for immediately,
Yeah.
because we're in deep trouble,
Yeah.
period. Everyone knows that.
Everyone knows that.
So to get someone in who's coordinating that and amplifying that and moving that along quickly on behalf of Tony and the head of school,
Right.
I think is critical. They would be paid after funding came in as an employee with their arrears
But as a board, I think we need to be assured that that
can happen.
is not just an IOU, but is actually part of our plan. I mean,
It is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I believe it is. The financing we just saw
We had a
says we have even with a head count of 182, at 11,700 per student, and we'll hear this from the finance committee in a second, yields a surplus of 170,000.
Okay.
That doesn't really tell us that we're going to be spending.
Yeah.
It tells us exactly what we can do.
Well, it doesn't tell us all the positions that are in place that maybe need to be in place.
It does.
Okay.
It does, actually, it does.
If
And it
we all
includes
agree on that.
it includes an office manager at $60,000 a year.
Which is more than
We could hire 3 for that.
Right.
So
So some of the salaries are higher than.
I think if we need to revisit that, we should do that, because my understanding all along has been that that person would be brought in ASAP. So I hope that happens.
Question.
I think that's absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any, through the chair, any argument about the importance of having the person come in. I think in terms of the financial argument, that just making sure that, given the cash flow situation and everything else, so whatever is worked out as an agreement with the program coordinator, director, that it is fundable.
Right.
In arrears, yeah, accrued.
I think for me,
That's-
for me also, as I look forward to next year, I mean, I felt like this year was, in my opinion, positions that were funded that should have been funded, others that should have been here that weren't here. And so,
So it's the mix, the balance in the mix.
exactly,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that that balance is there, and the program committee probably has recommendations
Well,
along
and-
those lines.
Right, and I think what we're going to hear though is that different people will come in at different times, it's all that we're
And
just
that's
talking about.
fine.
And that's, it is,
And that's
it is,
fine.
but by the same token, we'll find that someone who's slotted at 32 actually comes in at 38, but on the other hand, someone at 44 comes in at
Right.
30.
Right.
And all of those things will come out, which is why we were just talking about meeting monthly and tracking
But
the.
that's why sorry, Jim.
No, that's okay, no, that's fine. That's fine.
But that's why I think it would be important to say that initially, this position and this arrangement is more like a consultant arrangement
Mhm.
at first. And we hope it will grow into a longer term
It
thing.
would, but I think this person wouldn't do it if she couldn't be paid.
Oh, right.
So she would get paid as a full-time employee on July 1, and then paid in arrears for the consulting work done up to that point.
Mhm.
That's the key.
Okay.
Of course, we wouldn't do that if we hadn't planned to hire that person. So, I mean, I think Joe was saying this is a person we felt like we were making the commitment to.
Right.
And then it was just working out the arrangement of getting it to fiscal 12 for
Right.
the fiscal 11 work.
I guess I'm echoing Amy's desire to see how this, I mean, I want this to happen ASAP.
Right,
That's
that's not the
We all
question.
do.
That's not the question.
But I think the longer-term commitment may need to be reviewed in the light of,
Oh,
Do we
Jay,
have,
what-
do we
if I
have
may-
all the personnel we
Yes.
really need?
Oh, you're talking about the entire makeup and the
I'm
mix?
looking at next year.
Okay.
you know,
Looking at
I was
next
just going to say, in terms of, Jay, what I thought you were saying there was just to make sure we are financially capable of supplying a full year salary to that person.
that too.
Or that too.
but we are.
And
year.
I
But
would
that's
say we can talk about
dependent,
that.
yeah, but you could say that, and then you would not be able to fund the X, Y, special ed teacher, or
But
whatever.
this is why we have a budget right now. That's the budget that we are operating.
Right,
Right.
And that's had one change that now has taken it on a worst-case basis, we think, from 200 to 182 headcount. Everything else, though, stays the same because the surplus was enormous. There's still a
fabulous.
surplus.
That's fabulous.
But this is after all of the wish list.
But I'm again echoing Amy,
After all
that the
this.
board at some point needs to look at the whole budget and see how the commitments we're making for this coming year add up to whatever it is we really want. And our priorities are thought through, not done ad hoc.
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Well,
By
I
the
think
same
it
token,
ties
though-
to the same conversation we had in finance about it.
Mhm.
Another, council position or something along those lines that I think we agreed that we'd be revisiting much of this.
Okay.
Well, and, I mean, from even just the fresh review of the finance committee notes, all this will change in a month. And then it will change again a month later.
Right.
Right.
As long as we're all prepared for that,
Right.
that's the nature of this right now.
As long as the changes are discussed and looked at by a process of conversation so that we do things intelligently and not ad hoc, I'm happy.
Oh, no, me too, which is why these job descriptions are now about 4 months old. We couldn't have, I don't think, Jay, we could have had a discussion about these job descriptions if we wanted to.
And I think,
And we
Joe,
didn't want to.
correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but that, at least it has in the past, been a job of the program committee to recommend, what a structure might look like.
A structure.
A structure, meaning, what are all the pieces in terms of the programming that you need in place to make it happen? So,
Oh, yeah, and that's why the remarkable part of the budget was, we thought we were gonna have to make tough choices. We did.
Even with the
It's all in.
Mhm.
That's, I mean, so in a way, it says, okay, so everything, remember all this? It was, where are we gonna have to, give us the wish list? And, well, it turns out that you could load on the wish list and make it more expensive than you thought, and there's still almost $200,000 left over. That's after 18 students have been cut out of the enrollment number. Boggles the mind.
But there will come a time when painful choices will be made
Oh, yeah.
about the balance of things that we want to have in this school. And
No, that's right. And I would imagine that there's an executive director and a head of school who are leading us in that conversation.
Okay.
I think that's key.
okay,
Right,
We have-
and hopefully, as
but-
Tony says,
okay.
it's in collaboration,
Yeah.
so that you've got a program committee that's not just turning its wheels, but doing something for a reason.
Right.
Otherwise, there's no point in having.
That's actually-
Just through the chair, I want to go,
What?
I want to reiterate what Joe said a minute ago about how this will change next week and the week following, et cetera, et cetera. We won't fully know where we are with this budget until we start school late August, beginning of September, and we know who's actually in, walking through the door.
Right.
So we have to bear that in mind, and fully expect that we will come back and look at this, and maybe with glee, trying to figure out how we will direct these additional funds that have come in, or somberly making those difficult choices
Right.
within the program committee, head of school, and executive director working collaboratively on difficult decisions. I hope with input from other stakeholders, but as well. But and then the final piece is that I just want to be clear that I am being empowered by the board to go ahead with finalizing the hire of the program director in this consultancy role, with the full knowledge that the funding for that, that I will be negotiating with this person to defer payment, that we will work out a daily rate or something that works out for the individual and for the school, and that with the full understanding that we're essentially borrowing against our future revenue. And as long as, I sort of want the comfort of the board and please
You
do
do have a
that.
sense of board, especially because the finance committee, the earlier minutes will say, we can incur expense, but we can't pay any cash.
But that
And
expense,
That's okay.
that expense that'll be basically kited from fiscal
That
12.
is a tricky term to use.
Okay, fine. Let's just say we transport it, okay? But that will be in the budget. So that when we use those steering numbers, if it's 60, and it'll be more, but if it's 60, it won't be 60 plus 5, it'll be 55 plus 5.
Right, and which is the beauty of the budget that, the last budget that the finance committee looked at, which said, okay, so what are the real numbers? What are we gonna track month to month?
What I meant is, and I'm sure you know this, it comes out of the 60, not the 170 profit.
That's right.
We're not, oh, we got plenty of extra surplus.
That's,
Right.
yeah.
Because it's still a good, great steering document, the way we have it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so if
Yes.
you move this piece, you gotta put that piece back in that column.
Right, and then at some point,
Yeah.
we'll have to be looking at.
Because that 170 might not be there. I mean, you know,
That's right, that's exactly right. Although 182, we go,
That's when we buy our bus,
may go back up.
or
So,
rent a bus
but we'll see.
for outreach.
We almost used up the finance committee.
Well, we've also,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. I just, Craig, a couple comments is all I need to make, but Jay, please go ahead.
No,
Wait, are we gonna vote?
Oh, you're saying, no, okay.
I
All
was
right,
saying-
basically, I'll just, and Joe and Dave and Gordon, please jump in, because I know you will. I don't know anything about the question concerning how the numbers come up, but I just want to reiterate something, that the numbers that were prepared by Rick Crowley were done as part of the ESE's request to say, give us your numbers at 165. I think there's a kind of a misinformation out there that says our budget was cut to 165 students. It was not cut. We were told to take a range that was 10% from the top and 10% from the bottom. So if our middle estimate ground range is 182 students, our top is 204, and our bottom is 165. So the DESE, in its rightful thinking, would not really be so concerned about what if our numbers came in at 204 students, but they would be concerned if they came in at 165.
And I will jump in to say,
Yes.
the Beacon had that wrong, and the Gloucester Daily Times
It's
had that right in their story.
Yeah,
That it was
yeah.
cut from 2002 to 182.
So it's important to distinguish that, because I think there is not a clear reading of what that letter said.
That's right.
In some of the reporting that was done.
Yeah, because the
And,
Beacon said,
yes.
oh, they lose down to 165.
That's not what's happening
That's
here.
right.
And now, the second level of this discussion, when we did the numbers with 165 students, and we came up with a total budget, it still included all the things on the wish list, which I think is a very valuable point. Because the question for the DESE is, would you be viable at 165 students? And the answer is yes, because our error, our in the red, was about 1% of the total budget. So I think as a person who looked at this and said, well, you know, you've got a small number in the red. Yes, it's very small. It's 1%. We're still viable, even if we have to operate 1% in the red. So I couldn't be more pleased with the way this turned out. I do think that we need to do, a better job with the public and say, look, this is not the DESE telling us that we've only gained money for 165. The important thing is to let everyone know, especially the future parents coming here, that we have the resources to do what we want, and also to let them know the programming can be built the way we want. And the terrible shock of last year is that you started with 90, and then day one, it got cut down to 60, 65 or something. I mean, and we went through those numbers a couple meetings ago, and it's like, you take 1/3 haircut starting, of course that's going to expose the organization to stress. Of course things are going to, not go well. Of course you're going to have, terrible cutbacks and staffing problems. And I think that needs to be understood also. So under the circumstances, knock on wood, so far we seem to be getting through the year at budgeting of 65, and yet how many people do we have here right now? A lot more than that. And I think next year we'll have a lot of good things to do. The final point I'm going to make to Joe's point, which is something that I think Finance Committee knows really well, and the rest of the board knows, that yes, we do have to review these numbers on a monthly, if not bi-monthly basis, because things are not static. They change all the time. And things will come up, and we have to be prepared for them. And our job in finance and as trustees is to make sure that we can accommodate whatever changes need to happen. And I think we'll do a very good job on it, because we've got a terrifically hardworking group who has really duked it out on a lot of these issues, as we've been doing the last couple of months, to come up with a solution that is really best for the school. So with that, the new chair of finance is finished with his presentation.
The only problem with that finance committee report is that you have a motion on the floor.
That's my
And is that your discussion on Tony's motion? Because we never voted on Tony's motion to authorize him to.
Don't need a motion.
I think Tony just wanted a sense of the meeting.
I thought that's what you were making a discussion about.
Tony wanted the sense of the meeting and to articulate for us
Not
what
to
it
have
was
a
that we
motion
were,
to.
So we were thinking.
what it was that we were backing him to do.
The objective.
I mean, what he was allowed to say and what he was allowed to.
So we're not voting on your.
So that's not a vote. That's not a vote. It's a sense of the
Right.
meeting.
Right. Thanks, James.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
And we'll do a finance committee meeting as soon as we can set the standard date. I think that's good. I think we're meeting June,
June 1st. June 1st.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
which leaves the governance committee slot before the Board of Trustees meeting for Wednesday open.
Yeah. Yes.
To get any pre-May 24th business done, which I think is good.
Right.
Great. We'll postpone the other issues. I think that's it.
Yeah, sorry, when's the next meeting then? Is that-
I think it's Wednesday.
Next Wednesday,
The
18th.
The board meeting is Wednesday the 18th. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I'm asking when the next board meeting
Yeah.
is.
It's
Yeah.
next week.
So there's-
Wednesday the 18th.
So
It's like a working
governance,
classroom, everybody talks at the same time, I can't hear.
so governance would mean
a week from tomorrow.
Just before that.
yeah, whatever time is good for the
Yeah.
governance committee.
That's fine.
I'd imagine your colleague will be joining you.
Yeah.
I'll bet anyone's lunch.
Well, if we do it just before the board meeting, that would work.
what time is good for you? Because that will,
What's this
that will
for?
enable us
Early.
earlier
Couple
rather
minutes.
than. So if you can you do 6 or 5:30?
5:30. Yeah.
Or 5 if you want.
Kind of hard.
Okay, well then, yeah, if you want to do
Okay, so
5:30, we'll
it's 5:30.
we'll schedule the board meeting.
That will work.
So I need a motion.
Joe, you want to just talk briefly about items for that agenda?
Yeah, please. Good.
On the trustees meetings?
The board trustees
Okay,
meeting,
thanks.
yeah. It seems like one item would be preparation for the 24th, for the Board of Education meeting. So planning for that. I think also we're clearly heading into a pretty intense period of around hiring. And I would hope by that point we could have at least a preliminary plan about how that's going to proceed. So Tony, if you could report in on that, and perhaps our head school will be here to join us for that.
Can I add a specific to that, Tony, so it doesn't get left off? Because I know there's advertisement for teachers, but I know there's lots of other people that need to be hired, I understand. So there's a piece that in my mind hasn't been dealt with yet, so if you could address that, that would be great.
Other items? Antonio, you want to catch up tomorrow? There's at least some other things that add on.
Seems like about half this agenda will be.
It will, it's much easier to cut and paste. And some of the, well, all of them have to be, that's the beauty of a May 24th meeting, they have to be completely
Resolved.
So, Joe, are you looking for motions?
or more items for the agenda.
I was going to say, if we really want to have clarity about this, we should probably be focusing as much of the time as possible on the ESC review.
Goes to the top of
At
the.
the very top of the meeting, exactly, yeah. And I would say that, again, at some point, we do want to have the 501c3 update. I have some assignments for two of you at this table, which I'll fill you in with later, because of the original wheels that were turning a long time ago on this thing, that certain documents have to be signed, maybe that you originally signed on. It's not going to take a lot, but it's just something I'll be notifying you about. But so there are some little paperwork follow-ups that we'll have to do in order to sort of cover the loop on our end of the work, so we start the 501c3.
Thank you so much.
It's great to get
It's
that done.
great. A lot of work was already done, so it's just
So-
I should have someone
It's
write a
about
program.
follow-up, so
Yeah,
thank
exactly.
you.
Yeah.
And do we need an agenda item to have a status report on the funding of the Jennifer's thing by
Yeah.
next week?
Yeah.
So throw that on
We'll
there.
report on that.
Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?